Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Grant Beck, and I am with Next Step Network. We very much appreciate you taking the time to join us this afternoon for this critically important discussion on zoning and land use policies for HUD code manufactured homes. As more folks get signed in, I'm going to go ahead and put up two quick poll questions. If you could go ahead and answer those for us, that would be very much appreciated. And while you are doing that, I'm going to give a few quick points about today's webinar. So this webinar is being recorded and will be made available online in the next several days. Time permitting, we hope to have the opportunity to answer a few of your questions. As you come up with those questions, we encourage you to post them in the Q&A feature. And for those questions we're unable to get to on the webinar, we'll do our best to follow up in the coming days. So we'll give folks another minute here to answer some of our questions. And then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so it seems like most folks view zoning as one of the primary barriers to manufactured homes today, which means you're on the right webinar, so that's great. And then we're also seeing a fair number of folks who have seen exclusionary zoning impacting manufactured housing in their community or service area for their organization, which is great because these are two things that we hope to address in the conversation with our panelists today. So with that, I am going to, and you can see the results here as we go through. 77% indicate yes, that zoning is one of those primary barriers. 55% indicating yes, that exclusionary zoning has impacted manufactured housing in their community or service area. And so with that, I am going to kick things over to Stacey Epperson. Stacey?
Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are in the country. And thank you for joining us today to talk about zoning. Well, first of all, I just want to say there's a housing crisis. We all know that, right? We're like 3.8 million units short. So we need to increase supply. So I kind of view this as we need all hands on deck. No one can be left behind. And manufactured housing shouldn't be left behind because it should be part of the solution to the affordable housing crisis. It's still in a price point where most Americans or the typical American could afford a manufactured home if only they could get access to it. So today we're going to be talking about zoning. And with me, I have an esteemed panel of experts that have been thinking about or working or doing research with manufactured housing and particularly looking at zoning. So let me go through and make some introductions. First, joining us today is Dennis Smith. Dennis is an affordable lending manager in the single family customer and client engagement division. He manages the affordable housing preservation and manufactured housing initiatives that support Freddie Mac's underserved markets plan. He's a 20-year mortgage industry veteran, and he's worked in various phases of the mortgage process, and he brings a lot of experience to the panel today. Second, I would like to introduce you to Ramsey Cohen. Ramsey is the Director of Industry and Community Affairs at Clayton Homes. Okay? He is really taking a leading role on helping Clayton navigate many of the community relationships across the nation and those professional organizations. And we know that he's working on zoning and taking a look at policies, in particular local markets. Also today with us is Sarah Jarry. Sarah is the principal at SSG Community Solutions, where she creates program and policy solutions for complex affordable housing challenges. She advises on land use planning and affordable housing strategies, She's an adjunct professor, associate professor of urban planning at NYU, where she teaches several graduate law and policy seminars at NYU. She is also a non-resident fellow of the Urban Institute. And also joining us today in the conversation is Jim Gray. Jim is the senior fellow of the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. Many of us know Jim for the 5 years that he helped create and lead the Duty to Serve program at the Federal Housing Finance Agency, which is the regulator for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And prior to FHFA, he managed the Center for Excellence in Affordable Housing for NCB Capital Impact, which is now Capital Impact Partners. And lastly, Jenny Ortez. So Jenny is the Vice President of Design and Development for Neighborhood Partnership Housing Services. NPHS is a longtime partner of Next Step. Jenny is responsible for collaborating with not only her team, but many communities in their service area to deliver their affordable housing development program. And she has worked directly with manufactured housing. So I know everyone is welcoming this panel, and we're just going to jump right into questions. The way this is going to work is I'm going to put some questions forward to the panelists, and then they'll talk, and then as we wrap that up, we're going to take your questions. So if you have questions, you can put those in the chat function, and Grant's going to be monitoring this throughout the presentation. So Dennis, I would like to start with you. Earlier this year, Freddie Mac released some new research identifying opportunities to expand manufactured housing. I want you to tell us a little bit about this research, and then does Freddie Mac see some of its implications for the manufactured housing space?
Thank you, Stacy, and first and foremost, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to everyone who's joining the session today. As I think the poll indicated, zoning can have a heavy influence on manufactured housing and the larger manufactured housing market. But the industry really hasn't had access to data that could help inform decisions and strategies that could help lead to shifts in attitudes and prompt growth for manufactured housing. Freddie Mac noticed this gap in data. So we conducted research to fill that gap, to better understand and quantify the effects of zoning on manufactured housing and identify opportunities for market growth. For those who have a question, I think we could put up a link to the zoning research that we're going to discuss. So it's in the chat, and I'm certain that as an after event, it'll be sent out as well. But we drew upon various sources where we created a consolidated data set comprising 825 jurisdictions across 32 states. We layered loan origination data, pinpointing where manufactured home lending currently occurs. We looked at impacts of zoning in local markets, and we looked at profiles of consumers and communities that were supportive of manufactured housing. To that, we added where people who are mortgage ready, that is, who currently do not own homes but could qualify for mortgages, where those homeowners are concentrated. In this way, we created a holistic view that industry participants could use to design geographically relevant strategies and tactics for increasing the acceptance, use, and ownership of manufactured housing. This is the first time that a comprehensive analysis has been completed. And I could probably spend an hour talking about those results, and more importantly, I would bring our researchers on. But I just want to talk on just a couple of the significant findings. That stricter land use regulations relate to fewer manufactured home shipments and placements. And that relates to less manufactured housing financing. There's not a single state that requires jurisdictions to allow manufactured homes in all single-family residential neighborhoods. 95% of those jurisdictions in our data set limit manufactured home placements through minimum lot size requirements. So what's interesting, there's other ways to use zoning to impact what type of housing is placed in those communities. Almost 60% of those jurisdictions allow manufactured homes, but may require that they meet the same building standards as site-built homes, such as square footage, etc. We looked at shipment data. Areas in the West receive the most shipments of manufactured homes, with the South coming in second, while areas of opportunity are most prevalent in the Midwest. Although the shipments to the Midwest are on the lower end, the region presents the greatest immediate potential to increase shipments, placement, financing, and most importantly, affordable home ownership. That's based on Freddie Mac's Manufactured Housing Friendly Index in the report, a framework that we developed as part of our analysis. And I would highly recommend that you go out and look at that, because we identify how those jurisdictions are manufactured home friendly, etc. What's interesting to note is each metro area with manufactured home friendly jurisdictions contain between 7,000 and 2.8 million mortgage ready consumers with low and moderate incomes. And of those, about 26% of mortgage ready residents in manufactured home friendly areas are Black or Hispanic. So really a way to help with that equity in housing. You can find a high-level preview summary of the key findings and the full research report on our Manufactured Housing Opportunities for Growth microsite on freddiemac.com, and that link was shared in the report. There's additional resources to educate key stakeholders on the facts about manufactured homes, the zoning's impacts on the access to quality, affordable homes, and also learn more about Freddie Mac's support for manufactured housing.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Freddie Mac, for putting research toward this area. And so you can access this research by the link in the chat function, and we'll also be sending it out after the webinar. So Ramsey, I have a question for you. So as a leader in the manufactured housing space, how is Clayton approaching zoning and some of the zoning barriers for manufactured housing?
Yeah, thank you so much, Stacey. It's a great question. As Dennis said, I'm excited and thrilled to be joining today and speaking with such a great panel. So at its core, Clayton, we really believe that manufactured housing really shouldn't be looked at any different than traditional single family housing. Some of the things Dennis talked about that create challenges and issues for the industry in terms of where we can place homes, in terms of lot sizes or setback requirements or square footage requirements. I would argue that those things can be a bit discriminatory in nature, as Dennis alluded to. And so we want to work to collaborate with municipalities, understand where those motivations are coming from that are preventing us from entering those markets, so that we can work with them rather than against them. Because I think at the end of the day, regardless of who you talk to or where they live, people agree overwhelmingly that we need to address the affordability crisis in our country, that we need to create more units. That multiple million gap in affordable homes that you talked about is not going to be solved with any single silver bullet. And so I think for us, it's really about collaborating with organizations like Next Step and with industry partners, community leaders, to figure out ways that we can make adjustments to those zoning challenges and problems in local municipalities. I think the other thing is that we have to remain really innovative as an industry. And I think the thing that I would point to that really addresses that would be the cross-mod homes that have started to enter the marketplace here recently. I think, when you go out, and in my experience, if you talk to a lot of municipal leaders and you say, what are the challenges here locally? What are you against allowing manufactured housing into this market? They'll a lot of times back into the answer that I would love something like cross-mod. They're really more concerned with aesthetics and that sort of thing. And cross-mod checks all of those boxes. So I think working to expand access to cross-mod and telling that story, that's not something that we have previously done a lot of as an industry. And so I think a whole of industry effort to go out and tell those stories through, again, collaboration with other leaders in this space is really going to help us. And I think the other is that we've got to address some of the stigmas and things that exist around our industry. You know, there have been preconceived notions and ideas that are prevalent about what materials are used in the manufacturing process, whether or not they're energy efficient, whether or not they're quality built. And these are things that those who work in the industry know are not the case, right? We know we're on, can lead in terms of energy efficiency and in terms of quality. But we have maybe as an industry failed to go out and be loud about telling that story to consumers and policymakers at the local level, especially, and not doing that in as effective a manner as we probably could have. So I think those two things, really three things: collaborating with others, working to address a lot of these stigmas, and then remaining innovative by bringing new products like CrossMod to market, are going to be really key to helping us overcome the existing zoning challenges that we have.
I think that's great, Ramsey. I was going to ask you, what are the most important things? And you gave them to us, 1, 2, 3, there you go. So it's something the whole industry needs to really work on, right? And as we educate, I would just, it takes a lot of education, I think, with local officials. So we've got to start that process. And it has started. We just need to elevate it more and more. So let's switch over to Jim Gray a minute. And so Jim's moved to the Lincoln Institute, and you've been really convening leadership by working through two coalitions. First, the Underserved Mortgage Markets Coalition, and I'm Home, Innovations in Manufactured Homes. So how are these coalitions approaching zoning and the challenges for manufactured housing?
Well, thank you so much, Stacy and Grant. It's really an honor to be part of this distinguished panel. The Lincoln Institute really does see manufactured housing as an important part of the solution of the overall affordable housing crisis. And of course, probably most people on this call know that manufactured housing is at least a third of the duty to serve program that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac pursue under a regulation. And I guess to answer your question about the Underserved Mortgage Markets Coalition, it's really through the things that Dennis and Ramsey referred to. It's trying to get cross-mods and other approaches to mainstream manufactured housing so that it can better take advantage of the tools that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac offer to create mortgage products that are equivalent to the products that are available to everyone. And so I think really zoning is just part and parcel of that larger effort. On the other hand, the I'm Home network that we're working on at the Lincoln Institute is taking on zoning more head on. I think we're probably in a better position to do it. There's only so much that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac can do to influence local zoning. So I think maybe first let me say my understanding of the zoning is that it's really largely determined at the local level, and the I'm Home network is working through Next Step and many other partners, including some community-based partners, to try to help communities understand how restrictive zoning hurts their community. We've identified zoning as really one of 4 critical issues that are standing in the way of wide adoption of manufactured housing. So we're going to really continue to dig in on the issue.
Thank you, Jim. So I'm kind of watching some of the questions coming in. So there's something I think we need to address. So there's some questions about cross-mod, Ramsey. And so we need to do a pause and do a little terminology check in here. So Ramsey, would you please tell our audience what a cross-mod home is?
Yeah, Stacy, thank you so much. I was actually just typing out a response, and I'll provide a link in the chat for everyone. Yeah, I should have slowed down and explained. So a cross-mod home is, at its core, is a home that is blurring the lines between on-site and off-site constructed homes. It's a home that's going to have drywall throughout, permanent foundation, garage, porches. Very similar. In fact, the homes you see on my background are cross-mod homes. I believe, Stacy, actually, we have the same neighborhood from two different angles for our backgrounds there. So there are homes that have access to different financing packages available from Fannie and from Freddie. They appraise just the same as a traditional stick-built home. And so that's what I was speaking to about the innovative housing, is that blurring those lines between traditional core product for our industry of a manufactured home and, site built, what people would typically think of as a new construction home. And again, I'll provide a link to everybody in the chat.
Okay, thank you, Ramsey. So now we're going to talk about doing this work in the field. And so our partner, Jenny Ortez, out in Southern California, their organization is a little bit lucky with zoning because California has really taken a proactive stance on prohibiting discriminatory zoning for manufactured housing. And so it's really looked at almost equally to site-built homes. So Jenny, how has that helped you in your markets really be able to deliver affordable housing?
So the current zoning, for example, that we're currently working in the city of San Bernardino has not been restrictive whatsoever in our ability to do manufactured housing on land. The premise behind our mission is to create affordable housing. So we've been highly collaborative with other developers, small developers, other affordable housing developers in obtaining, if you will, land data on surplus land that's available for affordable home ownership in specific residentially zoned land. And we haven't had much pushback, really, thankfully, because we've had quite a demand of interest in our current phase, which is only 3 infill lots, but 260 inquiries. People are definitely interested in the homes. And yes, we're using kind of a cross-mod model as well. We're trying to, have the best upgrades we can to offer the homeowner a great experience at owning quality, affordable home ownership opportunities. So the appraisals, as was mentioned by Ramsey, we're utilizing MH Advantage as a finance option for the home buyers, and that allows them to come in with 3% down. Also, the appraisals are comparable to traditional stick-built homes. So we're getting close to finalizing that phase. There's 3 units, 3 homes, and the market conditions have shifted, as everyone knows. Construction costs have gone up, labor shortages here, and of course, interest rates are just increasing by the day. So with all of that encompassed, the DPA assistance to these affordable home ownerships is affordable home buyers, first-time home buyers, is very, very critical to making these homes affordable, of course. So we've had feedback from the city on participating for additional financing. We have the CalHome 100,000, the city 100,000 home dollars. So there's 200,000 there. And the homes are just, from when we first started, they've skyrocketed up to like 390,000 for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And we started closer to 350 is what we were thinking, 335, 340, 350, but we're at 390. So things are just, it's an interesting market and very challenging for a, affordable home in Southern California. Thankfully, we still live in an area of vast land opportunity, so we are looking to do more with potentially subdividing land and zoning it properly to residential lots, or continue to look for infill scattered lots for these type of opportunities. And the one thing that we do, look for is that these individual lots had home prints in the past, and that helps with offsetting development impact. So we obviously are seeking property that have footprint in the history of its lot, I guess.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. So you might be lucky that you don't have zoning discrimination, but those prices, though, that's the drawback, right? That market is a hot, tough market. And we've watched you do a lot of education with local officials. While they shouldn't be discriminating in zoning, it still takes, I think, the lesson is that you have to still educate everyone to do manufactured housing.
The lesson does continue, and there's always turnover, city staff, people don't know, re-educating building officials on the fact that it is, to standard of stick-built code, things like that are helpful to keep pressing the city staff on.
Okay, well, thank you, Jenny. Now we're going to switch over to Sarah Jurek. And so Sarah can bring the academic side of this conversation. So I know she's done some research for Next Step, literature review. So Sarah, where do you see the most pressing gaps in the research as it relates to zoning for manufactured home?
Well, first of all, I just have to say quick thanks, Stacy, and Grant for inviting me, and to all the panelists for caring about zoning, as well as the audience. It sends my heart pitter-pattering to have a discussion like this, and I just am thrilled. I'm also very excited because while you asked me about gaps in the zoning, I have to say that some incredible work has come out recently addressing zoning in manufactured housing. And I just want to point again to Dennis's talk about Freddie Mac's microsite, I guess he called it, on manufactured housing. It is fabulous. And the recent study on zoning that they did was very thorough and introduced this concept of a MH-friendly zoning environment, which I think is a very useful one to use. I also want to mention, and I'll put in the chat in a little bit, my colleague at Urban Institute, Karen Call and Daniel Ping, just came out with the paper on manufactured housing as a key to affordable supply. And that also covers a lot of ground on how manufactured housing can play a key role. But to answer your question, zoning is really local. Sometimes it's on the town or village level, and it's very hard to catalog the different local zoning and find it and address it systemically. That's why many advocates really focus on the state, because it's hard to drill down further than that. But I think it's important not to neglect your local zoning, and it would be very nice to have an easy to find catalog of local zoning regulations, which is nearly impossible. But just to give one example, a really common barrier to manufactured housing is that the local codes may still use the term mobile homes, although those were the term's not been active since 1976, but it can be very difficult to persuade a local official that a mobile home ban shouldn't apply to today's manufactured housing. And I think that kind of education at the local level is going to be important, and advocates are going to need some help in finding where there might be problems, and conversely, where there might be model legislation at the local level that should really be adopted and expanded. One other thing on research, I'd also would mention that you know, the zoning, the idea of a zoning public hearing immediately brings up nightmares of NIMBY horror stories. And I do believe that we need to treat the objections to manufactured housing like Ramsey said, as misconceptions, but not dismiss them altogether. And while there have been studies of home price appreciation and durability that are very, very good, they're also somewhat dated. And it'd be nice to have really current research in those areas in particular, because those seem to be the areas that local officials are most concerned about.
Okay, all right, good. Thank you, Sarah. So, Jim, Sarah reminds us that zoning is, you know, this very local issue, right? And so, but, you know, are there remedies that can be looked for, sought at the federal and state level? If so, what are some of those, Jim?
So, Stacy, I think the best way to start answering that question is to just briefly review what the federal decisions have been. And so the HUD code made it so that states and localities could not discriminate against HUD code homes for construction or safety standards, which was, of course, an important breakthrough, but it leaves open the question of zoning. So when they did the regulations implementing the HUD code, they tried to expand that, and they said any regulations that get in the way are not enforceable. And then HUD went even further in 1997. They actually issued specific guidance saying that you could not have discriminatory zoning rules. However, that's never been very well taken up by the courts. The courts have, I would say it's fair to say, the courts have pretty much dismissed that. So in some federal efforts through regulation to restrict or to limit restrictive zoning of manufactured housing have not worked. And at the federal level, it would take a statute to really change that. That's the only thing that we could do.
Yeah, that might be a challenge for us advocates, but maybe not impossible, I'll add. So,
well, right. And then I guess then maybe the other maybe more practical answer is that through Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, to the extent that manufactured housing becomes more generally accepted and we use cross mods to break down resistance to manufactured housing, then through those large mortgage companies, we can break down some of the zoning barriers.
Yeah, that might be the most effective strategy, right? As we continue to demonstrate this. So, you know, you've talked to us about, you know, maybe a legislative a tactic, and then also working through Fannie and Freddie. So, Sarah, this question's for you. What can HUD be doing to address some of these challenges with zoning? Can they do more?
Getting myself off mute. HUD is already doing a lot. They've taken a number of steps to increase interest among consumers, which is the first step toward improving zoning. In June, for National Homeownership Month, HUD held a webinar featuring housing counselors and Next Step to talk about manufactured housing. And at that webinar, HUD announced that it plans to add questions to the HUD counselor certification exam about manufactured housing, so clients are informed about this option. HUD held an innovative housing showcase on the mall that I'm sure many of the folks on the phone are aware of. But in addition, HUD has a very strong bully pulpit, and it really can promote best practices and models of state and local codes and offer funding to help local zoning officials re-examine their codes. HUD can offer further incentives in local community development consolidated plans to affirmatively further fair housing, encouraging manufactured housing. And one opportunity that I think is really there now for all of us is the zoning conversation is taking place very excitedly around accessory dwelling units. But the conversation about ADUs often doesn't join with the opportunity that manufactured housing poses for a type of ADU solution. And I think HUD could bring those two conversations together rather than keeping the people, the experts siloed about it. We should talk about both.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great. And I have read some of the approaches of successful communities to create some innovative zoning policies. And I think there's lessons to be learned by the manufactured housing advocates and industry about how to talk about this need to allow more choices in these communities. So thank you for highlighting some of those. So my next question is going to be for Dennis. So Jim was saying, well, maybe, this is something Fannie and Freddie can work on. Now, we know you can't do local zoning, but are there proposed activities that Freddie Mac thinks can directly or indirectly help address the zoning issue? And first, kudos for the research. So after the research, what's next, Dennis?
So I think a part of it, and really the essential part, is taking that effort to educate the market participants, not just the manufactured housing industry, right? So outreach to real estate professionals, lenders, even those within the manufactured home industry, the retailers, manufacturers, and also those developers who are looking for ways to keep the cost of development down. That manufactured housing is a great quality home for them to look at to use in their development. And we're taking a look at doing outreach in those markets that we've identified through the research to showcase manufactured housing as an affordable housing solution. It really plays a key role in facilitating placements, the sale of manufactured homes, and generating that market growth. I think, as Ramsey may have indicated, that the cross mod really creates an opportunity for people who may have some misperceptions about manufactured homes, who may have never considered manufactured homes, to look at them as a housing stock option. At some of the various shows, etc., we have shown folks what those manufactured homes look like, and we'll show them a cross mod, and a lot of times they'll be like, are you sure this is a manufactured home? It looks just like a site built home. So I think seeing is believing, right? And one thing that we're excited to be working on is some of the initiatives that Next Step is supporting, such as developing using quality manufactured housing that's energy efficient, especially in some of those, with some of those mission-based developers, to bring that to the market as an example. Ramsey mentioned earlier, it was real easier before they sold all the homes to take people out in his backyard down in Knoxville to see the homes. But isn't it great that there's some in California that NPHS can share? So making certain that we have those represented all across the country, and that's a way for those lenders, those real estate professionals, to view those homes and to see the value that they have in the marketplace and how they can support those that may be left on the sidelines today with the increasing cost of home ownership. Manufactured housing is a great way to help address some of those affordable concerns. And in support of that, we offer our choice home mortgage financing, which supports the cross mod. So as Ramsey mentioned, it provides some additional flexibilities, less money down for customers who meet certain AMI requirements, and specifically that appraisal piece. We recently announced that any Freddie Mac approved seller may originate the choice home mortgage offering. So we hope that that will give them greater visibility into the market. And every time we announce something, that gives us a good opportunity to get in front of those lenders, to get in front of those real estate professionals who might say, well, what is this choice home? What is a cross mod? And help educate them about manufactured housing and the potential in their backyard.
Thank you for that, Dennis. And for our nonprofit development partners that might be on the call today, you may be picking up this new term cross mod. One thing I wanted to explain about that if you've worked with us in the past over the last 15 years, all the Next Step homes meet the cross mod standard. You would just need to add Energy Star certification and FHA Title II permanent foundation, and you would have the Next Step spec. So some of you have been putting these homes on the ground, demonstrating this work. We just all need to continue to build on that, like Dennis is talking about. So Ramsey, I've got another question for you. So there's been an uptick in the focus on manufactured housing as a solution to the affordability and supply gap challenge. We've seen the White House come out with their supply action plan. There's been some new focus on this. So how do we best message this to folks in this space about the potential for manufactured homes? How do we talk about this to people around the country?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm thrilled and excited, as I'm sure everybody in the industry is, around the momentum that seems to be developing around our industry and how we can fit into the solutions for affordable housing and to get the number of units back to that 2.5 to 4 million gap that we have in affordable homes in our country. And I don't want to sound like too much of a broken record and repeat Dennis too much, but so much of what Dennis just said is absolutely true. And so I think, one of the things he said, and this is true for everyone throughout our industry, is they'll tell you is that seeing is believing, right? Like stepping into one of our homes, getting people familiar with it is absolutely critical, because with so many of our homes, the Next Step homes that you've been working on, cross mod homes, lots of consumer homes across the country, unless you saw the setup process, right? No layman, nobody who doesn't work closely in the home building industry would walk up to that and think that home is anything other than a house. And so we need to work to get more exposure to our homes. I think things like Homes on the Hill, the Innovative Housing Showcase, where we took a lot of homes as an industry and let people walk through. I mean, it was astounding to watch the reactions of tourists and folks walking around on the National Mall and stepping in and having, no idea that this was a factory built home until someone told them. And so I think that's a really, really critical part. And I think it's going to take a whole of industry effort, right? Like, it's not something that we at Clayton can do independently. It's not something that any nonprofit can do independently. It's going to take all of us locking arms and working to go out and tell that story. And I think a lot of it comes down to educating people on the quality of how our homes are built, the innovative construction methods that we're using, to again address those existing preconceived notions and misconceptions about manufactured housing. And I think the other, and a thing that is so critical for us to do to be successful, is to find real customers, find people whose lives are tangibly better because they made a smart choice and bought a manufactured home, because they're going to be able to go tell that story better than any of us. I can sit back and tell someone all these great things, but at the end of the day, consumers and customers whose lives are much better, who have had homes that have grown in value because they and have been able to do other things with their lives because they're not spending their entire paycheck on their home payment. Those are the kinds of stories that we need to go tell. And so I think we as an industry need to work to identify those opportunities and those customers and find ways to elevate their voices. We're already seeing some of that take place just naturally with people online on the internet of pushing back against some of these stereotypes or ideas about our houses. And so I think the more we can do that, the better that we're going to be as an industry.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So I'm going to ask each one of you a question, and we're going to do a little round robin here. So I want to know what the future manufactured housing looks like in this country. Okay. What can we be doing now to make sure this is a viable solution to address the nation's affordable housing needs? So as you're thinking about that 1 minute, I just want to pause a second and thank Next Step sponsors that really helped us put this webinar together. So I want to thank Freddie Mac and the Clayton Homes Foundation for your support to do this work. And then I'm going to call on Jim Gray, and he's going to tell us what the future manufactured housing looks like in our country.
Well, yeah, so I'm also at risk of sounding like a broken record because I think, but maybe the good of sounding like a broken record is we're honing in on some real solutions, right? So I would say that zoning is one of the key things that will have to be addressed to get to where we want to go on manufactured housing. The one that I pay the most attention to is financing. And of course, that comes back to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and creating mortgage products that will make manufactured housing financing work just as well as financing works for site-built houses. And then the third thing is the quality that you all at Next Step have been the leaders on, making sure that homes that come out of the factory are actually sufficiently energy efficient, that it's a good deal for the people who buy them, and that they will last for a long time. So to me, those are sort of the main things that that we need to get to a world where manufactured housing is not even thought of as separate from site-built housing.
Okay, thank you. Sarah, what do you think the future looks like?
Well, I think it's very bright, and I think it's having a moment actually on the national policy stage, which is incredible. And I think that I agree with everything Jim said about bringing it up to be just another housing option for people. I'll add something that may not be popular here, and that is that I do believe that consumer protection should be looked at so that the consumer has the same level of protection with their choices on manufactured homes and on financing options as they do on traditional homes. We're close and exactly the same in some areas, but in some areas maybe need a little work.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, Ramsey, what do you think about the future?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think, as Jim said, there's probably some good in the fact that we're sounding a bit like a broken record, because I think these are the kinds of important issues where we need to have alignment. To simplify, I think what a lot of us are saying is that the future is acceptance, right? That we do not have a lot of these challenges that we're talking about, that we've been able to overcome some of these prohibitive zoning rules and regulations, the message and understanding of our industry and how we can fit into the affordable housing mix is something that's well understood and doesn't require us to go out and champion. And as a result, we're able to enter into markets that we're currently prevented from being a part of, and we're able to provide more people the path to home ownership that right now those rules and regulations are keeping us from providing.
Okay. And so Jenny, what do you think the future looks like for manufactured housing in Southern California?
Well, I'm an optimist. I think right now it looks like there's quite a bit of legislative push and support for addressing not just affordable homeownership, but also homelessness. So one area that we have been asked about is, do we build to rent these homes to chronically homeless individual households? There's a huge push in California for permanent supportive housing, and we are looking at possibilities of utilizing a manufactured home on lots to rent to families that are in, that are homeless and that can still earn, we can still obtain project-based vouchers for. And then there's also the Section 8 program itself. I had, prior to developing these lots, I had no idea that you could use that as a down payment assistance as well. So that's a big push. We've had one family participate as a recipient of Section 8 housing. So getting together with the housing authorities in California, it's a huge push right now on identifying surplus land. Our state governor is pushing all municipalities, authorities, districts to identify any affordable, properly zoned residential lot or commercial lot for multi-family. So right now, I mean, I think the opportunities are endless. Manufactured housing is now being looked upon as an option to develop, and I think the various developers that are doing what they're doing now, even if it's market rate housing, you're seeing a lot of that in more affluent communities as well. And our infill small lots in less affluent, distressed communities are even shining brighter because they're looking really well, and people are. We just had the last home resell for about 376 in a community. One of the other factors we're looking at is long-term community land trust models, manufactured home on land. So I think, you know, keeping affordability for perpetuity is the next long haul for us, but nonetheless, it's still a possibility.
Okay, lots of work to do in California. Sounds exciting. And then lastly, we're going to ask Dennis what the future looks like, and I'm going to be tossing it back over to Grant for your questions. So this is a good time for you to get your questions in. So Dennis, what does the future look like?
It's hard to go last because you have such a great panel. They bring up so many valid points that I don't want to sound like a broken record that just keeps repeating the same thing. So I might just take a little different approach. I think the spotlight today is on manufactured housing because of that housing shortage, and specifically affordable housing shortage. So what we do as an industry today and what we do collaboratively will then carry us forward into the future. And I think through conversations like this and through other venues that we are on the right track. And I think that the future is absolutely bright. I think that this is a great opportunity to bust those stereotypes and those myths about manufactured housing, and for the industry truly to put the best foot forward and put that spotlight on the product that it is a high quality, energy efficient home, not manufactured home, but it's home, as Ramsey said earlier.
Yeah. Excellent, Dennis. I think that's a closing comment for us. And so Grant, I'm going to turn it back to you so we can have questions and answers.
Yeah, so I do want to thank everybody who's been actively participating in the chat. Some really great comments and feedback, and I see that folks are connecting with our panelists. So that's really kind of the robust dialogue we're looking to have. So we're going to try to get through these, as many of these as we can. So I want to start with Jerry Rue, and I apologize in advance if I mispronounce anybody's first or last names. So in California, the biggest challenge to using manufactured homes is lack of production. Developers here say it typically takes 9 to 12 months for deliveries. How do we increase production? So Jenny, I know you're working in that space. And then of course, Ramsey, love to hear your thoughts and feedback on this question as well.
I'll let you answer, Ramsey, first from the manufacturer's end.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think that's a challenge. I can certainly say that we are working as a organization and a business to grow our capacity in the future so that we can continue to meet these demands. The need for affordable housing is not going to, as I mentioned earlier, that 4 million unit gap, right? Like there's not a silver bullet that's going to solve that for us. And there's also not going to be a magic wand that gets waved and that's solved in the next year, 2, 3, 5, maybe even 10 years, right? And so we're going to grow and be able to meet that capacity. And I think too, as we work to shift the kinds of homes that we're building, right, then that timeline gets a little bit shorter. We at MHI's Congress and Expo in April unveiled a new single section cross mod that's about half the size of the homes that you see behind me. That home with land in most markets, may not be true for California, but would be around $200,000, right? But because it's a smaller footprint, as you can imagine, we can then develop and build a lot faster. More of those homes can move through a factory at a much quicker clip. And then, without knowing really the details of the market that you're in there, Jerry, one question I get when people ask us about backlogs and that sort of thing, I always say like, well, what's the timeline look like for a stick-built home, right? All right, many cases, if it's 9 to 12 months with us in that given market, it's going to be 24 plus months with a traditional builder in many cases. So we're still coming in a lot faster and solving an issue at a quicker rate than some other builders.
So I think we've had to be very strategic in our project timelines in terms of, developing the lot. It takes about 7 to 8 months about that to get the permits prepared, all the design, everything all in, your specs correctly. And that's just working with our organization. And we've had to look at options whereby we purchase the unit in advance, of course. We're in the queue, but we're also taking advantage of that time and utilizing it for pre-due diligence, pre-development, all the good stuff that goes in with respect to getting the unit delivered and getting started on that on-site construction. So we thought we would shy away from ordering units because everyone says it's 18 to 24 months away. But once we ordered the units, having the direct dealer relationship with the manufacturer, we have 6 months at this point. So we are looking at a delivery of a 6-month turnaround. So it really just depends again on, how quickly things can get done from the, the developer's end too. So we just have to be strategic, and we could have easily just said, let's forego ever doing another manufactured housing unit phase or infill lot developments, but we want to be proactive in this field, and we want to make sure that this is long-term and sustainable, and one house at a time, I guess, is what we have to think about.
Great, thank you so much. Another question specifically for you, Sarah, from an anonymous attendee. Have you considered approaching the Uniform Law Commission with your idea about model laws on MH zoning?
It's a great question, and I do think that the Uniform Law Committees are the right venue to take this. And I'd be happy to join anyone who's looking to do that. I haven't done it before, so I know it's a long process, but you're correct. I think that's an avenue that both industry and other partners can join together in advocating with the Uniform Zoning Committee or Land Use Committee's work to create model codes.
Great, thank you. Dennis, a quick clarification, I think on kind of your initial opening about that new research from Freddie Mac. Was Dennis's comment about the 7K to 2.8 million mortgage-ready clients related to areas already currently zoned for MH is the question.
So that goes into how we describe MH zoning friendliness. So the most friendly MH jurisdictions are inclusive of that number. Keep in mind that within those areas, there may still be pockets that may need some additional work to be done on the zoning regulation in order for MH to be placed there. But those are the most friendly to MH as the zoning pertains today.
Great, thank you. And we have time for one last question. And Ramsey, I'll direct this towards you from Herman. What marketing materials, research support has the industry developed collaboratively for use by strategic partners to promote manufactured housing to prospective home buyers?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I'm so glad you asked it, because that's a lot of what my role is focused on putting together and working to do, is to bring all these different elements and materials, the research that we've talked about today, as well as the marketing materials and things that we have at our disposal here at Clayton to try and tell that story. And so That's something that I am personally working to put together and develop. I've had some success in a few markets and helping, but it is something I'm learning and doing as I go. And so, with any process, stubbing my toe a couple times, right, through the process, but always looking to collaborate with others and learn and grow, and then, tweak and change, because, one thing I hope everyone knows and understands or takes away from this, if they didn't before, is that zoning is incredibly local. And so sometimes having a single turnkey solution for everyone is a little difficult, because there isn't that model language that Sarah was alluding to, and that I think we really need. And so it can be tough to have that one size fits all, but we do have some resources to provide to those that need it.
And if I may just piggyback off of what Ramsey had mentioned, on that same microsite that Grant had sent out earlier, where the research I talked about for where the opportunities to expand manufactured housing, we also have some of our prior research, such as we took a look at a decade of manufactured home loan performance. So that's one thing we always hear in the industry, is how do manufactured home loans perform? We also did a survey on manufactured home loan customers' shopping experience. So that research is available. And we also have a paper called In the Zone, How Manufactured Housing Can Help Close the Supply Gap. And within that paper, we pull all the different elements of research that we've done, including a great piece that was done by FHFA when they looked at their housing price index in 2018. They actually looked at manufactured housing, and their analysis determined that manufactured housing really appreciates very similar trajectory to site-built housing. So that's a lot of information that our lenders often ask us when they're considering offering manufactured homes, and what we've heard from the field from those folks who are talking to those local zoning commissions, et cetera. So that is a paper that's publicly available and great information to help build up that portfolio of here's information from Freddie Mac on manufactured housing.
Okay, I want to thank everybody who took the time to ask questions. As I mentioned at the top of the webinar, we'll do our best to respond to those in follow-up out to attendees. And I will give it back to Stacy to close us out this afternoon.
Okay, so thank you, panelists, for a wonderful job. Thank you, participants, for coming and making time to learn more about zoning. I think the future's bright. I see one day that homebuyers can walk vibrant, diverse neighborhoods and have what I would say a normal experience in shopping for and buying their first home. And of course, I think all these home buyers are going to be prepared and supported to get these really good loans that will eventually be bought by Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. And we're doing this in the right way. So that's our bright future. So have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.